At Thanksgiving dinner, my son threw the turkey at me and shouted, "Go back to the nursing home, you useless old woman." 3 weeks later, I sold the house and left them without saying a word. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I stood there, frozen in shock, as gravy dripped down my favorite blue blouse, the one I'd ironed so carefully that morning. Stuart's words echoed in the sudden silence of the dining room. My hands trembled as I tried to wipe away the mess with a napkin that was much too small for the disaster before me. I'm Inez Morrison, 65 years old, a retired elementary school teacher who spent 35 years shaping young minds, a widow for 5 years, and apparently a useless old woman according to my own son. The Thanksgiving dinner had been perfect until that moment. I'd spent 3 days preparing everything, baking pumpkin and pecan pies from scratch, hand-rolling the dough for my famous cranberry tarts, and roasting a 20-pound turkey to golden perfection. My dining room table gleamed with my late mother's china and crystal glasses that I only used for special occasions. Stuart had been drinking since he arrived with Jennifer, his wife of 15 years. I noticed the slight sway in his walk, the too loud laugh, but I said nothing. I never said anything about his drinking, not since the Christmas 5 years ago when he told me to stop nagging him about it. "Mom, when are you going to sell this ridiculous house?" Stuart had asked suddenly, halfway through the meal. "It's way too big for just you." "I'm not planning to sell," I replied quietly, passing the mashed potatoes to my granddaughter Lily. "This is my home." "It's impractical," Jennifer chimed in, her voice sweet but her eyes cold. "Think of the maintenance, the property taxes. At your age, you should be downsizing." "At my age?" I repeated, feeling a familiar tightness in my chest. "I'm only 65, not 95. Stuart snorted. "You can barely take care of yourself. Last week you couldn't even remember where you put your glasses." "They were on my head," I admitted with a small laugh, trying to lighten the mood. "That happens to everyone." "Not to everyone," Jennifer said. "Just people who should consider assisted living options." I set down my fork, my appetite suddenly gone. "I'm not going to any nursing home. I'm perfectly capable of living independently. For now," Stuart muttered. "But let's be realistic. Dad left you this house, but he didn't leave you the means to maintain it forever. Your teacher's pension isn't going to cover everything indefinitely." That wasn't true. Robert had left me quite comfortable, with investments that Stuart knew nothing about, but I didn't mention that. I never discussed my finances with Stuart because money seemed to be the only thing he truly cared about. "I was thinking," I said instead, trying to change the subject, "maybe we could all go see the Christmas lights in the park next weekend. They're doing a special display this year." "Christmas lights?" Stuart laughed sharply. "Mom, are you even listening? We're talking about your future here. Our future. This house is the only real asset you have. My future is not up for discussion at Thanksgiving dinner," I said firmly. "Now, who wants more cranberry sauce?" That's when it happened. Stuart's face turned an alarming shade of red. He stood up so quickly his chair fell backward with a crash that made everyone jump. Before I could react, he grabbed the platter with what remained of the turkey and hurled it at me. "Go back to the nursing home, you useless old woman," he shouted, his voice slurring slightly. "You're nothing but a burden to everyone." The turkey hit me square in the chest, sending gravy, stuffing, and meat sliding down my blouse onto my lap. The china platter clattered to the floor, miraculously not breaking. Silence fell over the table. My grandchildren, Lily and Max, stared wide-eyed, forks suspended in midair. Jennifer didn't look shocked. She looked amused, the corner of her mouth twitching upward. No one moved to help me. No one said a word against Stuart. With as much dignity as I could muster, I stood up slowly, napkin clutched in my trembling hand. "Excuse me," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I need to change." As I walked away, I heard Jennifer say softly, "See? She can't even handle a little family discussion without falling apart." In the sanctuary of my bedroom, I peeled off the ruined blouse and sat on the edge of my bed. I didn't cry. Tears wouldn't come. Instead, a strange calm settled over me, like the eye of a hurricane. I changed into a clean sweater, washed my face, and returned to the dining room. They were all eating again as if nothing had happened. Stuart had refilled his wine glass. Jennifer was checking her phone under the table. Only my grandchildren looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes. I sat down and picked up my fork. "Who wants dessert?" I asked with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. That night, after everyone left, I stood in my kitchen surrounded by dirty dishes and leftover food. The house felt emptier than it ever had, even in the 5 years since Robert died. I picked up a framed photo of Stuart as a little boy, gap-toothed and smiling in my arms. "What happened to you?" I whispered to the image of my son. "When did you start seeing me as nothing but a house and a bank account?" I didn't know the answers, but I did know one thing. Something had broken inside me today. Something that couldn't be fixed with polite smiles and pretending. For the first time in my life, I felt a cold, hard resolve forming in my heart. I would never allow myself to be humiliated like that again. Not by my own son, not by anyone. A week after the Thanksgiving disaster, I was still moving through my days in a fog of disbelief. The memory of turkey gravy dripping down my blouse as Stuart's words rang in my ears kept replaying in my mind. I'd barely slept, barely eaten. The betrayal cut deeper than I wanted to admit. That Tuesday afternoon, I was dusting the living room bookshelves when I heard the front door open. I wasn't expecting anyone, but Stuart had a key, one I'd given him years ago for emergencies. I tensed, not ready to face him yet, but instead of coming to find me, I heard him and Jennifer speaking in hushed tones in the foyer. "I don't think she's home," Jennifer said. "Her car's gone. My car was in the shop for routine maintenance. My neighbor had dropped me off after we had lunch together." "Good," Stuart replied. "I need to check something in Dad's old office anyway." I froze, duster in hand, hidden from their view by the wall separating the living room from the entryway. My heart pounded as I heard them moving toward Robert's study, which I'd kept largely untouched since his death. It was my private sanctuary now, filled with his books and the lingering scent of his pipe tobacco. Silently, I moved closer to the hallway, keeping out of sight. Their voices drifted clearly from the study, unaware of my presence. "The sooner we get her into Cedar Grove, the better," Jennifer was saying. "My cousin says they have an opening next month in their assisted living wing." Cedar Grove, the upscale retirement community on the edge of town. I'd driven past it many times but never imagined myself there. "Mom won't go willingly," Stuart replied. "You saw how she reacted at Thanksgiving." Jennifer laughed softly. "Well, your little turkey tantrum didn't exactly help the cause, did it?" "I lost my temper," Stuart said defensively. "But you have to admit, she's getting worse. The forgetfulness, the stubbornness. We just need to document the incidents," Jennifer said in a practical tone that chilled me. "Dr. Campbell is on board to help evaluate her. Once we establish diminished capacity, the power of attorney kicks in." I had to press my hand against the wall to steady myself. Power of attorney? I'd signed a document years ago after Robert died, naming Stuart as my agent if I became incapacitated, but I was nowhere near incapacitated. "The house should sell quickly," Stuart continued. "The market in this neighborhood is hot right now. We could easily get $700,000, maybe more. And once we pay for the Cedar Grove entrance fee and set aside enough to cover her monthly care, the rest is ours," Jennifer added. "We could finally renovate our kitchen and take that European vacation." My knees nearly buckled. They weren't concerned about my welfare. They wanted my house, my home of 40 years, to fund their kitchen renovation and European vacation. "What about her pension?" Jennifer asked. "It's decent for a teacher," Stuart replied. "About $4,000 a month. Not enough to maintain this place, but more than enough for her basic needs at Cedar Grove. The excess can go toward Max's college fund." I bit my lip to keep from making a sound. They had my entire future mapped out without any input from me. A tiny room at Cedar Grove while they remodeled their kitchen with the proceeds from selling my home. "We should start moving some of the valuable stuff out gradually," Jennifer suggested. "The silver, the antiques, she probably won't even notice." "Next week," Stuart agreed. "I'll tell her I'm taking some things to be appraised for insurance purposes." I'd heard enough. Moving with a stealth I didn't know I possessed, I retreated to the kitchen at the back of the house. My hands shook as I filled the kettle and set it on the stove, trying to process what I'd just overheard. 20 minutes later, I heard them preparing to leave. I switched on the radio to signal my presence, and Stuart appeared in the kitchen doorway, startled. "Mom, I didn't know you were home. Where's your car?" "In the shop," I said calmly, stirring my tea. "Jane dropped me off after lunch." He looked momentarily flustered. "We just stopped by to check if you needed anything." "How thoughtful," I replied, meeting his eyes steadily. "I'm fine. Thank you." After they left, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, my tea growing cold. The betrayal felt like a physical wound, raw and throbbing. My own son, plotting to declare me incompetent, sell my home, and warehouse me in a retirement facility. That evening, I went to Robert's study and opened his desk drawer. Behind a stack of old folders was a small fireproof box where we had always kept important documents. My hands trembled slightly as I unlocked it. Inside were papers that Stuart knew nothing about. Robert had been far more financially savvy than our son realized. Besides the house, there were investment accounts, stock certificates, and insurance policies. I'd never paid much attention to these matters, trusting Robert's judgment during our marriage and simply maintaining things after his death. Now, I spread everything on the desk and began to calculate. My teacher's pension was indeed around $4,000 monthly, but Robert's investments had grown substantially over the years. All told, I had close to $1 million in assets, not including the house. I was not a helpless old woman dependent on my son's charity. I was, in fact, financially independent. The next morning, I called my bank and made an appointment with their financial advisor. Then I contacted Martha Reynolds, a realtor I'd known for years through the school where I taught her children. "Inez, what a lovely surprise," Martha exclaimed when I walked into her office. "What can I do for you today?" I took a deep breath. "I'd like to sell my house, Martha, quietly and quickly." Her eyebrows rose in surprise. "You're beautiful Victorian? But you've lived there forever." "It's time for a change," I said firmly. "And, Martha, I'd appreciate your discretion. I don't want my son to know until it's done." She looked confused but nodded. "Of course, Inez. It's your house. We can list it privately first. Minimize the publicity." As I left her office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, a sense of power. For too long, I'd allowed Stuart to dictate the terms of our relationship, to make me feel small and irrelevant. I'd stood by while he and Jennifer treated me with thinly veiled contempt, no more. They thought I was a feeble old woman, easily manipulated and controlled. They were about to discover how wrong they were. For the next week, I lived a double life. On the surface, I was the same Inez, making my usual trips to the grocery store, attending my book club, and smiling politely whenever Stuart called to check in on me. But beneath that carefully maintained facade, I was executing a plan that would change everything. Martha, true to her word, listed my house privately. Within 3 days, she called with news that made my heart race. "Inez, you won't believe this. I have a couple, the Hendersons, who've been looking for a historic Victorian in this neighborhood for months. They saw your house and fell in love. They're offering full asking price, all cash, with a flexible closing date." I gripped the phone tightly. That's wonderful, Martha. They'd like to see it again tomorrow if that works for you. And Inez, they don't want to change a thing about it. They love the original woodwork, the stained glass, everything. Tears pricked my eyes. Robert had spent years restoring the house's Victorian details, lovingly stripping paint from banisters and repairing cracked stained glass. The thought of new owners who would appreciate his work eased some of the pain of letting go. "Tomorrow afternoon would be perfect," I told her. "Stuart never visits on Wednesdays." After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, sipping tea and thinking about what to do next. I needed somewhere to go, somewhere Stuart wouldn't immediately think to look for me. I picked up my address book and flipped to the R section. Rose Tillman, my college roommate who now lived in a retirement community in Florida. We'd kept in touch over the years with Christmas cards and occasional phone calls. I hadn't seen her in person since Robert's funeral, but she'd called a few months ago mentioning she had a spare bedroom if I ever wanted to visit. Before I could overthink it, I dialed her number. "Rose, it's Inez Morrison." "Inez, what a wonderful surprise. How are you, dear?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. I need a change, Rose. I remember you mentioned having a spare room. Say no more, Rose interrupted warmly. The room is yours for as long as you want it. Sunshine Village is a lovely place. You'll fit right in. When can I expect you? How about 3 weeks from now? I need to tie up some loose ends here first. After we hung up, I made a list of everything I needed to do. Contact a moving company for the items I wanted to keep, decide what to donate, forward my mail to a P.O. box, transfer my banking relationships to national institutions I could access from anywhere. I also needed to contact my attorney to update my will. The house Stuart and Jennifer coveted so much would soon be sold, and I had no intention of leaving them the proceeds. The next day, the Hendersons returned to view the house. They were a lovely couple in their 40s with 2 teenage children. As they walked through the rooms, admiring the craftsmanship and asking thoughtful questions about the house's history, I felt increasingly confident about my decision. We can close in 2 weeks if that works for you, Mr. I. Henderson said as they prepared to leave. Our lease is up at the end of the month, and we're eager to move in. 2 weeks would be perfect, I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. That evening, Stuart called. Mom, Jennifer and I are coming over for dinner on Sunday. There's something important we want to discuss with you. I could imagine what that important discussion would entail. Cedar Grove, no doubt, with brochures and gentle coercion. That sounds lovely, I said, injecting warmth into my voice. I'll make your favorite pot roast. Great. And Mom? Maybe don't mention it to the kids yet. This is more of an adult conversation. Of course it was. They wouldn't want my grandchildren to witness them trying to convince me I was too incompetent to live independently. After hanging up, I called the moving company and scheduled them to come the day after my closing. Then I contacted the local women's shelter to donate most of my furniture. Finally, I made an appointment with my bank to close my local accounts the day before I planned to leave town. Each step I took made my plan more real, more irreversible. Sometimes, in the quiet evenings, doubt would creep in. Was I overreacting? Was I being unfair to Stuart? But then I'd remember the turkey sliding down my blouse, the humiliation burning in my chest as everyone sat in silence. I'd recall Stuart and Jennifer's cold calculation as they planned to sell my home out from under me. No, I wasn't overreacting. I was finally standing up for myself. Sunday arrived, and with it, Stuart and Jennifer. They brought a bottle of wine and forced smiles. I served the promised pot roast, making small talk about the weather and Jennifer's garden club activities. As we finished dessert, apple pie that Stuart barely touched, he cleared his throat. Mom, we've been concerned about you living in this big house all alone. I took a small bite of pie, chewing slowly. Oh? We've been looking into some options, Jennifer chimed in, reaching into her purse. There's a wonderful community called Cedar Grove. It's not a nursing home, she added quickly. It's a luxury retirement village with different levels of care. She slid a glossy brochure across the table. On the cover, smiling seniors played golf and sat in a tastefully decorated lounge. They have an opening next month, Stuart said. We've already put down a refundable deposit to hold it for you. I picked up the brochure, pretending to examine it with interest. That's thoughtful of you. It makes financial sense, Mom, Stuart continued, encouraged by my apparent receptiveness. This house is worth a lot of money, but it's a money pit in terms of maintenance. At Cedar Grove, everything would be taken care of for you, and you'd have company, Jennifer added. Other people your age. I nodded slowly, maintaining my facade of consideration. And what about the house? What would happen to it? Stuart and Jennifer exchanged a quick glance. We'd help you sell it, of course, Stuart said smoothly. The proceeds would pay for Cedar Grove and give you a nice nest egg. I see, I said quietly. Well, I appreciate you thinking of me. Let me consider it. They looked surprised and pleased by my lack of resistance. As they left that evening, Stuart squeezed my shoulder. You're making the right decision, Mom. You'll be happier there. You'll see. I smiled and waved goodbye from the porch, watching their car disappear down the street. Little did they know, in 10 days, this house would belong to the Hendersons, and I would be well on my way to a new life. one that didn't include Stuart or Jennifer or Cedar Grove. The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of quiet, deliberate activity. I moved through my days with newfound purpose, methodically preparing for my departure while maintaining the illusion of normalcy. Each morning, I woke before dawn and spent an hour sorting through 65 years of accumulated possessions. It was remarkable how little I actually needed. My wedding china, which I'd carefully preserved for decades, would go to my granddaughter Lily when she was older, not to Stuart and Jennifer's kitchen renovation fund. I arranged to have it stored with a trusted friend from my book club. The house closing was scheduled for Thursday. On Tuesday, I visited my attorney, Benjamin Lewis, who had handled Robert's estate after his death. "This is quite a change, Inez," Benjamin said after I explained my situation. "Are you sure about this?" "More sure than I've been about anything in years," I replied firmly. He nodded, making notes. "And you want to update your will to remove Stuart as a beneficiary?" "Not completely," I clarified. "I'm setting up a trust for my grandchildren's education. But Stuart and Jennifer will no longer be primary beneficiaries. Yes." Benjamin looked up from his notepad, his expression serious. "You know they could contest this, claiming you're not of sound mind." I smiled thinly. "That's why I'd like you to arrange for an independent psychological evaluation. Today, if possible." By Wednesday evening, I had a notarized letter from a respected geriatric psychiatrist confirming my mental competence. My will was updated, the house closing was set for the next morning, and most of my personal items were either packed for Florida, arranged for donation, or designated for storage. I wandered through the rooms of my home one last time, running my fingers along the familiar wallpaper, remembering the life Robert and I had built here. The Christmas mornings when Stuart was young, opening presents by the fireplace. The dinner parties with friends, laughter echoing through the dining room. Robert's last days in our bedroom upstairs, holding my hand as we said goodbye. In the master bedroom, I opened my jewelry box and took out the locket Robert had given me on our first anniversary. Inside was a tiny photo of us, young and smiling. I clasped it around my neck, a reminder of happier times. Downstairs in Robert's study, I unlocked his desk drawer and removed a small leather book, his journal. I'd found it after his death, but had never read it, feeling it was too private. Now, sitting in his chair, I opened it to a random page. October 15th, 1995. Stuart brought home another failing grade today. Inez spent hours helping him with his homework while I was at the office. She has infinite patience with him, more than I could ever muster. I worry about the boy. At 16, he shows little ambition beyond what benefits him immediately. Inez says he'll grow out of it, but I see a selfishness in him that troubles me deeply. I flipped forward several years. June 3rd, 2005. Stuart and Jennifer announced they're buying a house far beyond their means. He hinted, not subtly, that he expects us to help with the down payment. Inez wants to give them the money. "It's what parents do," she says. "But I wonder if we're enabling behavior that will only get worse." I agreed to the loan, but I've documented it properly, despite Inez thinking that unnecessary. Stuart needs to learn financial responsibility sometime. A lump formed in my throat. Robert had seen what I'd been blind to. Stuart's sense of entitlement, his expectation that we would always bail him out. I closed the journal and placed it in my suitcase. Some truths are hard to face, but necessary. Thursday morning dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a blue suit I'd had for years, but rarely wore. It seemed appropriate for signing away the home I'd lived in for 4 decades. The closing went smoothly. The Hendersons were excited. The lawyers efficient. When it was done, Mrs. Henderson handed me a sealed envelope. "We wanted you to have this," she said warmly. "A small token of our appreciation for entrusting us with your beautiful home." Inside was a handwritten note thanking me for the house and promising to cherish it as we had, along with a gift certificate for a local nursery. "For your next garden, wherever it may be," the note read. I returned to the house, no longer my house, to finish my final preparations. The moving company would arrive in the morning for the few pieces of furniture and boxes I was taking with me. A small rental car waited in the driveway. packed with my immediate necessities for the drive to Florida. As I was checking the closets one last time, my phone rang. Stuart. Mom, I was thinking of stopping by tonight. Maybe we could discuss the Cedar Grove situation some more? I kept my voice light. I'm afraid tonight's not good, dear. My book club is meeting late. How about Sunday dinner instead? Perfect, he said, sounding pleased. Jennifer found some great resources about transitioning to retirement living. We'll bring those along. That sounds lovely, I replied. I'll see you Sunday at 5. After hanging up, I looked around the emptying house. By Sunday at 5, I would be halfway to Florida, and Stuart would be standing on the Hendersons' porch, facing the consequences of his actions for perhaps the first time in his adult life. That evening, I walked through each room one final time, saying my silent goodbyes. In the kitchen, where I'd prepared thousands of family meals. In the living room, where we'd celebrated birthdays and Christmases. In the bedroom, where Robert and I had shared our most intimate moments. I wasn't just leaving a house, I was leaving a lifetime of memories. But I wasn't leaving them behind. I was taking the best parts with me. As darkness fell, I sat on the porch swing, listening to the familiar creaking of its chains, watching fireflies emerge in the garden. A strange peace settled over me. Tomorrow would bring a new beginning, a life reclaimed. My phone chimed with a text from Rose. All ready for your arrival. Weather is beautiful here. Can't wait to see you. I smiled and texted back, looking forward to it. We'll call when I'm on the road. I had told no one else about my plans. Not my book club friends, not my former colleagues, not even my neighbors. I would write to them later, once I was settled. But for now, my departure would be as quiet as Stuart and Jennifer's plans for me had been. The night grew chilly, and I went inside to make a final cup of tea in the kitchen that would soon belong to another family. As the kettle whistled, I found myself humming softly, something I hadn't done in years. Tomorrow, for the first time in decades, I would be answerable to no one but myself. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, but beneath the natural anxiety of such a dramatic change, something else was growing stronger by the hour. Hope. Friday morning arrived with gentle sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows, the Hendersons' windows now, technically. I had slept surprisingly well, considering it was my last night in the house. Perhaps it was because, for the first time in years, I felt truly in control of my life. The moving company arrived promptly at 8. 2 young men efficiently loaded my few remaining possessions into their truck, my reading chair, a small writing desk that had belonged to my grandmother, 3 boxes of books, and 5 boxes of personal items. Everything else had been donated, given away, or designated for storage until I was settled. Is that really all, ma'am? One of the movers asked, looking puzzled at the small load. That's all, I confirmed with a smile. I'm downsizing quite dramatically. By 10 o'clock, they were gone, taking my belongings to a storage facility in another town where they would remain until I sent for them. I had deliberately chosen a location 2 hours away, somewhere Stuart would be unlikely to check. I walked through the empty house one final time, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything important. In the kitchen, I left a bottle of wine for the Hendersons with a note wishing them happiness in their new home. On the mantelpiece, I placed a sealed envelope addressed to Stuart. Inside was a brief message. Stuart, by the time you read this, I will be gone. I have sold the house and moved away. Please do not try to find me. When I am ready, I will contact you. I know about your plans for Cedar Grove. I know about your intentions to sell my home without my consent. I know everything. I raised you better than this. Mom short and to the point. No recriminations, no emotional outbursts, just facts. He would know exactly why I had left. At noon, I took one last look around, then locked the door and placed the key under the mat for the Hendersons, as arranged. My rental car was packed with just a suitcase, a cooler of snacks for the road, and a small bag containing my medications, important documents, and Robert's journal. As I backed out of the driveway, a wave of emotion washed over me. 40 years of memories in that house, raising Stuart, loving Robert, building a life. But the house wasn't my life anymore. It was just a structure, and now it belonged to a family who would create their own memories within its walls. I drove to the bank first, where I closed my remaining local accounts and collected a cashier's check for the proceeds from the house sale. Combined with my other assets, I now had a substantial sum secured in accounts that Stuart couldn't access, more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Next, I visited the post office to set up mail forwarding to a P.O. box in Florida. The postal clerk smiled as she processed my request. "Moving somewhere warm for retirement?" she asked conversationally. "Something like that," I replied, not elaborating. My last stop was the cemetery where Robert was buried. I hadn't told him about my plans, which seemed strange even to me. For 5 years, I'd visited his grave regularly, talking to him about my day, my worries, my small triumphs. He had been my confidant in life, and I'd continued the habit after his death. I placed a small bouquet of yellow roses, his favorite, on the headstone. "I'm leaving, Robert," I said softly. "Not just the house, but Stuart too. I know you would understand." I touched the cold marble. "You saw what he was becoming long before I did. I was too busy making excuses for him, enabling him." A light breeze rustled the trees overhead, and I took it as a sign of Robert's approval. "I'm not sure when I'll be back, but I'll always carry you with me." I touched the locket at my throat. "Wish me luck." By 2 o'clock, I was on the interstate heading south, my GPS set for Rose's address in Florida. The further I drove from my old life, the lighter I felt. I'd never been particularly adventurous. Teaching elementary school in the same town for 35 years wasn't exactly the life of a thrill-seeker, but now, at 65, I was embarking on the most daring adventure of my life. I thought about Stuart discovering my absence on Sunday. He and Jennifer would arrive at 5, expecting to find me preparing dinner, ready to be convinced about Cedar Grove. Instead, they would find new owners and my letter. What would his reaction be? Anger, certainly. Disbelief, probably. Perhaps even concern, though I suspected that would be more about the lost inheritance than about my welfare. I pushed the thoughts away. Stuart's feelings were no longer my primary concern. For decades, I had prioritized his needs, his wants, his convenience. I had shaped my life around being available for him, even as he grew increasingly dismissive of me. That chapter was closed. I stopped for the night at a modest hotel in Virginia. After checking in, I called Rose to update her on my progress. "I'm about halfway there," I told her. "Should arrive sometime tomorrow evening if traffic cooperates." "I can't wait to see you," Rose said warmly. "I've made up the guest room, and there's a welcome dinner planned with some neighbors. You're going to love it here, Inez." "I'm sure I will," I replied, surprised at how much I meant it. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of what I'd done. I'd left my home, my community, my entire life behind. I was driving toward an uncertain future in a place where I knew exactly one person. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I being reckless? Should I have confronted Stuart instead of disappearing? Was I running away rather than standing my ground? I took out Robert's journal and opened it to an entry I'd discovered during my packing. May 10th, 2010. Inez gives too much of herself, always has, to her students, to the community, to Stuart. Everyone takes, and she keeps giving. I worry what will happen to her when I'm gone. Who will look after her interests when she's too busy looking after everyone else's? I closed the journal, a sense of resolve replacing my doubts. I wasn't running away. I was finally, after all these years, putting myself first. Robert would have approved. Sunday arrived, and at precisely 5 o'clock I checked my watch, imagining the scene unfolding hundreds of miles away. Stuart and Jennifer pulling into the driveway, perhaps noticing the different car parked there but not thinking much of it. Stuart using his key, only to find it doesn't work in the lock anymore. Their confusion when strangers answer the door. The shock when they're handed my letter. By now, Stuart would be reading my words, finally understanding that his carefully laid plans had backfired spectacularly. The house he coveted was sold. The mother he'd dismissed as useless and incompetent had outmaneuvered him completely. As I drove the final stretch toward my new life in Florida, I felt no malice toward my son. only a profound sadness for what our relationship had become. But beneath that sadness was something stronger, a fierce determination to reclaim my remaining years, to live them on my own terms. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving dinner, I had sold my house and disappeared without a trace. Stuart had thrown the turkey at me and called me useless. Now, he would learn just how capable I truly was. 1 year later, I sat on the balcony of my condominium, watching the Florida sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. A glass of iced tea sweated on the small table beside me, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine from the garden below. This had become my favorite time of day, a moment of quiet reflection before joining friends for dinner or an evening activity. My life in Sunshine Village had taken shape more beautifully than I could have imagined. Within weeks of arriving, I had made friends, joined the community chorus, and started volunteering at the local elementary school, helping children with reading difficulties. My background as a teacher made me a natural fit, and working with young minds again brought unexpected joy to my days. My condo was smaller than my old Victorian, but it was mine, purchased outright with a portion of the proceeds from the house sale. The rest remained carefully invested, ensuring my financial independence for whatever years I had left. Rose had been right. I did love it here. The community was vibrant, filled with active seniors who defied every stereotype Stuart and Jennifer had tried to impose on me. We took classes together, organized outings to museums and concerts, and gathered for weekly movie nights in the community center. I had even started dating, something I never expected at 66. Arthur Williams, a retired history professor with kind eyes and a quick wit, had asked me to dinner 6 months after I arrived. Our relationship had developed slowly, companionably, built on mutual respect and shared interests. Last week, he'd taken me sailing on his small boat, and we'd stayed out until sunset, talking about books and travel and second chances. My phone buzzed with a text from Arthur. Still on for dinner at 7? Made reservations at that new Italian place. I smiled and replied affirmatively, then set my phone down, letting my thoughts drift back to the past year. Stuart had tried to find me, of course. The day after my departure, my phone had exploded with calls and messages, alternating between anger, confusion, and false concern. Mom, what the hell? Where are you? You can't just sell the house like that. That was my inheritance. Mom, we're worried about you. This erratic behavior proves you need help. I hadn't responded to any of them. Instead, I had blocked his number and Jennifer's, changed my email address, and asked Rose to screen any calls to her home. I wasn't hiding exactly. I had simply chosen to step away from a toxic relationship. Stuart had eventually discovered my new location through Martha, the realtor, who innocently mentioned Florida when he confronted her about the house sale. Within 2 months of my departure, he had appeared at Sunshine Village, demanding to see me. The community had a security gate, but Stuart had somehow talked his way past the guard. I was returning from a walk when I saw him standing in the lobby of my building, his face flushed with anger. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he'd shouted when he spotted me. "You sold our family home without even telling me. You disappeared without a word." Several of my neighbors had stopped to stare, including Arthur, who had stepped protectively to my side. "Is everything all right, Inez?" Arthur had asked quietly. I had nodded, then faced my son calmly. "Stuart, I left you a letter explaining my decision." "A letter?" he'd sputtered. "A 3-sentence letter after abandoning your family? After destroying our plans?" "Your plans," I had corrected him gently. "Plans you made without consulting me. Plans to declare me incompetent and take control of my assets." His face had paled. "That's not—" "Please don't lie to me, Stuart. I overheard you and Jennifer discussing it in your father's study. Cedar Grove, power of attorney, selling my house to renovate your kitchen." Arthur's eyebrows had risen, but he'd remained silent beside me. Stuart had glanced around, suddenly aware of our audience. "Can we talk somewhere private?" he'd asked, his voice lower. I had considered refusing, but decided closure might be valuable, for both of us. I'd led him to a small community garden where we could talk privately, but still in public view. "What you did was cruel," Stuart had begun once we were seated on a bench. "Disappearing like that. Do you know how worried we were?" "Were you worried, Stuart? Or just angry that your plans fell apart?" He'd looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "You don't understand. We were trying to help you. By declaring me incompetent? By taking my home? By putting me in a facility against my will?" "Cedar Grove is a nice place," he'd protested weakly. "And you're getting older. Living alone isn't practical." I had studied my son's face, searching for the little boy I'd raised. The child who once brought me dandelion bouquets and handmade Mother's Day cards. Somewhere along the way, that child had disappeared, replaced by a man who saw me as a resource to be managed rather than a person to be respected. "Stuart," I had said finally, "I'm not moving to Cedar Grove or anywhere else you choose for me. I'm living here, among friends, building a life I enjoy. I'm financially secure and mentally competent, as verified by a geriatric psychiatrist whose evaluation is on file with my attorney." His expression had hardened. "And what about us? Your family? My grandchildren are welcome to visit any time. As for you and Jennifer," I had paused, considering my words carefully. "That depends on whether you can accept me as I am, an independent woman capable of making her own decisions, not as the burden you've decided I've become." He'd left shortly after, making vague promises to think about things and talk again soon. But 6 months had passed before I heard from him again, this time in the form of a stiffly worded email apologizing for his approach to my living situation and asking if we could re-establish communication. I had responded with cautious openness, suggesting we begin with occasional phone calls. Our conversations remained awkward, stilted affairs, but they were a start. I had made it clear that our relationship moving forward would be based on mutual respect, not obligation. Jennifer rarely participated in these calls, and I didn't ask about her. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt, at least not in the same form. My phone buzzed again, pulling me back to the present. A video call from Lily, my 15-year-old granddaughter. I smiled and accepted it. "Grandma," her face filled the screen, bright and animated. "Guess what? I got the lead in the school play." "That's wonderful. Sweetheart, tell me all about it." As Lily chattered excitedly about rehearsals and costumes, I felt a profound sense of contentment. This relationship, at least, remained untainted by the tensions with Stuart. I had made sure of it, maintaining regular contact with both grandchildren through calls, texts, and occasional visits when they came to Florida with their father. After ending the call with Lily, I went inside to prepare for dinner with Arthur. As I changed into a blue dress I'd bought recently, more stylish than anything I would have worn in my old life, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same person who had stood in her dining room a year ago, covered in turkey gravy and humiliation. This woman stood straighter, smiled more readily, lived more fully. Stuart's cruel words at Thanksgiving dinner had been intended to diminish me, to reinforce my supposed helplessness. Instead, they had become the catalyst for my liberation. I fastened Robert's locket around my neck, the one piece of my old life I wore every day. "You would be proud," I whispered to his memory. As I left my condo to meet Arthur, I passed several neighbors who greeted me warmly by name. Here, I wasn't just Stuart's mother or Robert's widow. I was Inez, friend, volunteer, chorus member, book club leader, and a woman who had found the courage to start over at 65. The turkey incident had been meant to be my lowest moment. Instead, it had become the beginning of my best chapter. Stuart had called me useless, but in walking away without a word, I had found my power, my voice, and finally, myself. Now I'm curious about you who listen to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.